Hey there, and welcome to the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit, where we are all about great teaching, great learning, those solid learning strategies, technology and creativity, and all of that good stuff with practical things that you can use in your classroom tomorrow. I'm Matt Miller. I'm the host of the summit, author of Ditch That Textbook. And in today's session, I'm always super pumped, but in this case, I'm like really super pumped because I have a couple of fellow Hoosiers, fellow people from the state of Indiana here, and we're going to be talking about differentiation. Now, I know sometimes you hear about differentiation. It's like, oh, we're going to talk about differentiation. Let me go find another video. But hold on, because this is going to be good stuff. We're going to give you some practical things that are going to help you meet the needs of your students right where they are and to make it easier on you by using technology and other means. So, see, that doesn't sound as painful as the word differentiation does, hopefully. Right. So, so I want to kick this over to our guests today. We've got Angie and Nate Ridgway, who happen to be the co-authors with me of this beautiful book, Don't Ditch That Tech. Differentiated Instruction for a Digital World. Yes, it hasn't been out. It came out this spring, like, when was it?
Almost 6 months ago.
Almost 6 months ago, yeah, which it doesn't even seem like it's been that long. So,
no, it doesn't.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you real quick. So Angie, do you want to go first?
I'd love to, Matt. Thank you so much for having us.
Of course, my pleasure.
And it was so much fun to work with you on our book. And I'm Angie Ridgway. I'm a professor of education at University of Indianapolis and co-author with these awesome educators of Don't Ditch That Tech.
Yeah, very good. Nate?
And my name's Nate Ridgway. I am her son, not her husband.
Yes.
We always have to specify.
We get that a lot.
I am currently a high school history teacher here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and basically I have a background in UDL, special ed, and kind of technology, and we just kind of took, really our thinking, the three of us, and kind of meshed it together and came up with this idea. So
yeah. And I should say I'm a Spanish teacher, and that's how I met Matt. We kind of followed each other around Spanish teaching or foreign language teaching conferences. I'm so grateful that we did.
Yes, me too, absolutely. And so the three of us, we were talking, I don't even remember when this happened first, but we had been talking about how differentiation was, it was such a helpful, useful teaching practice. And we were just thinking, there's so many ways that technology can help us differentiate and, meet our students' individual needs. And we just didn't feel like there was a book or like a whole bunch of work done around that. So that's kind of where this all came from. And I think that between the three of us, we have come to find that there are some misconceptions about differentiated instruction. I always like to joke that my wife and I, when I was first getting into education, when I was doing interviews, my wife would always say, make sure you drop the word differentiation into that interview. It makes it sound really good, even if you don't totally know what it is. So there's like that side of it, and there's the side of, sometimes we think that it is creating 100 different versions of one assignment so that each student has their own. And it's just, it's not that. So I want to kick this over to you guys real quick. Are there any other misconceptions you can think of? And then let's switch it over to what is differentiation actually?
Well, I think you've hit the primary struggle that teachers have in their mind when they hear the word differentiation, that it does mean 15 different lessons for the 100 kids I have a day. When it doesn't have to be that complex. There are lots of ways to differentiate, and technology has really just opened up an entire portal of ways to make differentiation possible with less work on the teacher and to be more metacognitive or to have students start to think about their own thinking. What do you want to add to that?
I think definitely the time thing is definitely something that has to be addressed. I think the other thing too is that it's sometimes the last thing that a lot of teachers tend to think about is they've gone through all this lesson planning or they've broken down standards and these kind of things. However, I think in some ways it almost is the thing that teachers should start with, because differentiation isn't just something you do at the end of your lesson. It's also something you do at the very beginning, and you kind of are being very intentional about your planning. So what is differentiation then? It is a difficult thing to define, and it depends on who you ask. So like the person who we really went to for our answer, and who most people go to, would be Caroline Tomlinson, and she has written basically every book that's ever been written. And she basically defines differentiation as basically thinking about with the learner in mind and differentiating with content, product, and process. And again, there's like lots of things that we think about with learners, whether it's their readiness, their interest levels, aptitude. There's lots of things that we can dive into that. Yeah.
And so we tried to put our book together in the same vein, that we also put the book together so that it met the readiness level of the teacher, because we're all at different spots on our journey to differentiate and to better meet our students' needs. And we're also in different spots in terms of our access to and integration of technology. So some people have had one-to-one situations. Your school's been one-to-one for a long time.
For a long time.
And some schools in the Indianapolis area, and I know across the country, because we're working with teachers from all parts of the country, are just now starting to see one-to-one situations where every student has a device in a classroom. So we wanted to make sure in the book that we differentiated for the reader.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. In fact, I've got it here. You can see kind of all throughout the book that we have these little icons. And they talk about the different archetypes or the different like places that teachers are with technology. The one I just showed you was the pilot one. This is the one for the museum exhibitor. And then, kind of goes on and on and on to the restaurant owner and so on and so forth. And so the neat thing about this, and this was not me, this was the Ridgway's brainchild, which I thought was great. The thing I love about this is that it really does help us give examples for where everybody is. So you start with the pilot, and you think about the pilot, and the pilot is in the front of the plane. They have a destination in mind, but the passengers don't really have anything to do with, they're just along for the ride on the plane. You get to the museum exhibitor, and the museum exhibitor is really sort of like a curator. They're the ones who are just kind of like gathering things together for the for the person who goes through the museum. But again, the person who comes to the museum only gets to see what's been gathered, even though they've been gathered meaningfully. It goes to the restaurant owner, and the restaurant owner, if you go and you order something off of a menu, there are some predetermined selections, but there's also a lot of customization that the customer can use. And then we get to the council member. The council member, if you think about somebody who's like in government, that's a council member, they are accountable to their constituency. But they're also the ones that are still going out and advocating for them. So there's a lot more flexibility there.
A little more back and forth, right?
Yes, exactly. And then it goes down to the creative art coach, which is kind of like a more step back and let the artist go do what they're going to do, and maybe offer a little bit of advice on the side. So I thought I'd just bring those up just because some of the examples that we'll talk about in this video are going to fall into all of those those archetypes. We'll give some examples for where teachers are in their journey.
And so you'll notice the theme kind of between those roles. And really, I guess this speaks more to me about like how I personally feel about differentiation. I'm sure you feel the same, is that like basically it's ultimately the teacher is letting go. And that's letting go of control. It's letting go of the content. It's letting go of the process of how your students are learning, which can be scary the first time you do it.
Sure.
But giving students choice and input and power can be a very transformative thing in your classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to dig into some of the practical things. That was one of the focuses we had in this book, was given lots of practical examples. And so we want to give you some of them right here in the video, some things you can start using right away. And so maybe we'll go through those three that we talked about in the definition of differentiation. We'll go through content, process, and product. So maybe we can start with content. If we want to be able to differentiate for the student and help to differentiate the content in a way that meets students exactly where they are. I think technology this is kind of one of the overarching themes of this whole idea, is that technology can help us differentiate. And It can help us save time, and it can make us more efficient in that differentiation, instead of thinking it as like, oh gosh, now I got to differentiate. And oh gosh, I've got to use technology. Oh man, I don't have enough time to do all these things.
Right.
These things are going to help you do what you do, but do it more effectively and efficiently. So let's go ahead and start with content. What are some places where, if we want to start differentiating for content and we want the technology to help us, what's some advice that you have?
And so I think I want to say about that is that's varying the level of content for your learner or his or her entry point, and where I see the power of technology, because I started teaching back and using purple mimeograph copies. Yes. Is that in using the technologies we're about to mention, you can replicate a lesson at varied content levels with really just a click or two, renaming the file or editing the file or adding to it. And the other thing that I think is immensely helpful to teachers is you can share the curated lessons with different content levels across a team by just sharing a link or a file within a system. So that we'll talk about a few of the systems that we found to be really helpful in that arena.
I'd say there's probably 2 or 3 apps that we definitely point people to right away. The first one has been a personal favorite of mine now for a couple of years, and I use it all the time in my classroom. And it's called ClassTime. It's a small startup, but it's kind of if you're familiar with like a Socrative or like other apps that are out there, it's kind of similar to that, but it's got some kind of unique quirks to it that I really, really like in terms of using in my own room, and especially because I have like a flipped classroom. It's amazing for that. So what ClassTime does basically is it's a rapid fire assessment app, and you get these really, really quick, clean, downloaded basically X's and checks and, all this data that I can gather normally with students in the first like 5 minutes of my classroom. But the nice thing is, because it doesn't operate off of like a room system like a Socrative does, or like a Kahoot or something like that, is that I can basically gather this data at any time that I want to, and students can complete it at any time, which is very, very flexible for them in terms of, how I get that information. How then you differentiate that content then is because I get that information and that data so quickly, I can make decisions about grouping, very, very rapidly and very, very quickly, which I like. And I've even done it where, and I had a student set up with an escape room, actually, in one particular day. And if they scored above an 80% on a class time assessment, they got to skip a couple of rooms because I had it provide them like a passcode that they could skip a couple rooms ahead with. And they were doing that digitally.
So it's great for an anticipatory set or a pre-assessment, because you could put a probing question right at the top of class time. And I like it because I'm a traveling teacher now. So I can just put the code up and the students can log in right when they come in.
Yeah.
They answer that probing question, and quickly I'm like, okay, Sierra, John, Juan, you're in group 1. Susana, Samuel, you're in group 2. And I can differentiate on the fly to either give a content that's more scaffolded or content that's more challenging based on what I just learned. Because as soon as they respond, you get the data chart. Yeah. It's just an amazing app.
And the thing too is that those question sets are instantly copyable. So as soon as I do have stuff differentiated for students, if I want them to do some kind of an exit ticket, I can literally just take a question set, copy it, duplicate it, and send it out to 2 different groups. Which is like, it takes less than the time that I took to actually explain the sentence right here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Or you can do basic and honors or what. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So to refresh what we just talked about here, what class time will let you do is throw out an anticipatory set, an opening question, so that you can kind of see where everybody is. You can take that data and you can immediately stick them into groups. And then if you've got a set of questions that you want them to work on, then you can assign those to the different groups and even make very small adjustments to them so that they're a better fit for where everybody is. Is that a safe way to put that?
Yeah. And it's you can find it. It's really easy to find. It's at classtime.com, and it's a freemium app. And I really highly encourage you to try out the free version at first, because it's like Pear Deck. Like when you try Pear Deck for the first time, there's like so much utility on just the free version that it's definitely worth your time checking out.
Yeah.
The other app I thought we wanted to talk, or that we should talk about in terms of differentiating content, is IORAD. IORAD is not super well known, but I think it should be. I think it's like one of the most like dangerously underrated apps right there out now, like in the ed tech world.
And let's stop and spell that for them.
Yeah, so it's IORAD .com. So IORAD, like just how it sounds. And when you hop onto IORAD, they actually have, it says, capture, share, and learn application workflows in under a minute, which is the most unsexy way possible they could say of, this is an interactive tutorial that can teach you to do anything. Which I wish they would rename it, but that's really what it does.
Mainly procedural knowledge.
Yes.
So it's those step-by-step things that you share with the students 15 times, and then they still ask about step number 2.
Yeah. So like back in my day, like we used to go to the computer lab, and like the teachers would like, and the teachers would like print out a piece of paper. Maybe it would have screenshots on it if they were fancy, right? But then it would have like, go to this site, then click this, then do this, then do this. And by like step 5, you've got 16,000 kids asking you, like how you actually do the actual process, right? So basically what IORAD does is it takes your computer screen, and these tutorials take maybe 5 minutes to set up for students. And it will have the students, it's not a screencast, it's basically the students are like doing like a simulation of the actual thing that they're supposed to do. And so if you can imagine, like, for example, taking every parent's question of, how do I log in and see my kids' grades? And you can have them actually practice, the real application of actually doing that. And how do I log into Canvas? I can't see what Johnny's doing. It's perfect for those kind of things. So there's 2 ideas you could do with that right off the bat. But what other ideas would you recommend? Because I have more. But.
And so I think it's a way to differentiate process.
Yes.
Because you could have 2 or 3 IORAD set up for different students in your classroom, and one group is using this IORAD to learn the procedure or the knowledge. Another group's using a second one, and then a third one, because they just take minutes to set up. Yeah. So basically, as you navigate the steps, IORAD creates that for you, is what happens.
Exactly. And it's such a cool thing. Whenever you try it out, you don't think, basically all you're going to do is you're going to hit record up in the top corner of your screen, and it's going to start tracking what your mouse is doing. And it's going to capture, and it's going to capture all of those actions and then turn them into a workflow that you can add text to, and you can add like step-by-step instructions to. And Nate, this is something that you've done. You've done a bunch of this with your students, where you'll give them an IORAD and they'll have basically the workflow for the entire class, right? Yeah.
So I use it for flipped classrooms, which is amazing for that, because like then there's absolutely like zero excuse of like not knowing where the kid like should have clicked. And also parents can then look at the lesson too and see exactly what their kids should have done. The other thing that I want to mention about IORAD as well is that it automatically Google translates into almost any language spoken on the planet.
Nice.
Now, it's not perfect, but it's there, right? It's an attempt. And the other thing too is that on like the pro version, and I don't know how much the pro version is, there's like even options to add like audio, like overlay of your voice talking and stuff like that. However, the free version is amazing. It's great. And the other thing I will tell you, there's so many applications for this, because I don't think people have realized like how much potential this thing has. Like sub-plans would be amazing for this, because you're gone. The kids don't have you. It is like your best toolkit for a sick teacher.
Teacher development, handbooks, talking your students through handbooks. One of my good friends, one of my good friends is a visual artist, so she does all those safety procedures at the beginning of the year, and has to verify the students have actually gone through them. So you could
like
use it for that.
Don't set the lab on fire with a Bunsen burner.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's lots of procedural things that you could use that for.
Yeah.
That's
totally. Yeah. This is great. Go ahead,
and the
Nate, sorry.
materials are shareable, they're embeddable, they're emailable. It's very, very easy to use.
So if you grab a link to an IORAD workflow or a tutorial or whatever, that link, since you just got that link, you could stick it in Google Classroom, you could stick it in an LMS, you could email it, you could put a link in a document or on a website or something. Like there's a lot of places you can put that. See,
yes.
This is such good stuff already. I mean, we're already talking about how to differentiate content, and we've got two good ideas right here. We've got using class time to do that anticipatory set to pull everybody in and give them, some customized options. And then we've got IORAD where we can do these workflows, and you could create 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 workflows in not very much time, especially once you get the hang of it. And now each group of students has their own specified directions, and you haven't had to totally reinvent the wheel. There was one other thing that I thought I'd mention too, and it has to do with Google Classroom. I know whenever you create an assignment in Google Classroom, when you assign that assignment, you have the ability to take your class and to click your class, and I think it says the number of students up at the top, and there's a drop-down menu that comes down, and it has all the students checked. And so if you want to assign an assignment just to a small group of students or to 2 or 3 or 4 groups of students, what's great is you can take that one assignment and you can do the basic version of the assignment for one group of students and only check that third of them maybe. And then take a second third where they would want to do things more visually, and so you have a little twist on it that makes it a little more visual, and you just check the names for that one. And then you've got this group over here where those students are probably more likely to finish early, and you want to make sure you've got a couple of extra extension activities at the bottom of it, and you just check the names of those third right there. And now all of a sudden you have 3 assignments, and all you did was you took that one assignment, you copied the text for the one assignment, you paste it into the second one and make a couple little adjustments. And then you paste it into the third assignment and you make a couple little adjustments.
Right.
You just assign it to the kids that you need to assign it to. So that's another way to, that you can easily differentiate the content, and that's kind of the process as well.
Yeah,
so, absolutely. It could be either, really.
A lot of these kind of bleed in between the two. There's Google Drawing. You can also do the exact same thing with your kids, like adding in GIFs or for certain students that need more
visual.
GIFs, if you prefer. Yeah, if they need more instructions. There's another app out there that's also similar in terms of doing kind of like the quick copy paste and add modifications thing, and that's Insert Learning, which is definitely worth a glance. If you have, I believe it's an extension for Chrome. I'm not sure if they've added other extensions for other web browsers out there. But it basically, like Insert Learning, which is another good app that we recommend because we've used it in our classrooms, is basically you can take any online content and then add in scaffolded videos, audio recordings, questions,
post-it notes.
Yeah, so like how Edpuzzle is for YouTube videos in terms of adding scaffolding, Edpuzzle is for
Insert
online
Learning
content.
Is for
I'm sorry.
Insert Learning is for online content.
Yeah. Those are good. Those are good suggestions.
There's one other one, if we're going to talk about differentiating content, that I would neglect. I'm like looking over my list here that I would neglect to not mention, and that is Tween Tribune by Smithsonian. If you just Google Tween, like TWEEN Tribune, they basically have. So I know Newsella for many educators has been their go-to for differentiated readings. That is going away.
It's going to pay, isn't it?
And it is now only paid except for current day events. So if you want good, academically researched articles that you can instantly scaffold by Lexile level, and they also have them in Spanish, Tween Tribune is definitely worth checking out. And if you can't even distribute those materials to your kids digitally, you can always print them, and that is always an option. So,
and what I like about Tween Tribune is sometimes when a student is a struggling reader, or as Matt and I know, a new language learner, it means, people might typically think let's take them to an elementary text or a young kiddo's text. Between Tribune doesn't do that at all. So if the students are reading about, a spaceship or anything, a physics experiment or anything on Tween Tribune, they'll see the same pictures, similar text. They wouldn't know from looking one across the shoulder to another that they're actually reading and interacting at different lexile levels.
Yeah.
So I like that. You stay developmentally appropriate with the content, but the student is supported in different ways.
Yeah.
And Tween Tribune is just really powerful, and everything's there, free of charge.
It's free
because it's a Smithsonian product. So that's
great.
Really quite good too.
That's huge. Where there's not the stigma of, oh, I got the lower version of this. Like I got the blue paper and that person got the pink paper, and now I realize what the difference is. It's like it's almost impossible to tell. So, all right. So this is great. This is good stuff. So that's focused around differentiating content. So now we can either go to product or process. Which one do you guys want to go to next?
You want to do product next?
Sure, we'll do product.
Yeah. All right, cool. What are some suggestions that you've got there?
So with product, in terms of like what you are having your students making,
like expressing their knowledge.
And expressing their knowledge. A lot of this that I've found in terms of differentiation really comes down to and I can say this for me, being a history teacher, is like breaking out of the models and the typical ways that you've always thought that you've had to assess kids. There's a blog post that I would love to link you guys to.
Oh, that's a great post. You should. Yeah.
Which is, and we'll link it here in the video for you so that you can get to it as well, which is 18 alternatives to essays, because I'm a history teacher and I have never assigned an essay for my students ever in my 6 years of teaching history. And so there's all these ways that I've had students express their knowledge, everything from creating choose your own journey games to actually creating and authoring and publishing podcasts in the classroom. So a lot of this comes down to like really thinking about like the expectations that you have for your kids and the really the learning outcomes and objectives that you had for them, and then kind of thinking about like what's the way that they could show and demonstrate that they can demonstrate this knowledge.
So let me tag on to that if I can. So we've not changed the outcome. We haven't changed what the student is expected to know or be able to do, or as Carol Ann Tomlinson calls them, the CUDs, right? Knowings, understandings, and demonstrations, and so forth. We've not changed that, but we've changed the mechanism or the vehicle by which the student can give you his or her knowledge. And I always think back to Nate's younger brother's second grade teacher, because Keegan struggled at that time with handwriting. And so finally she said, he knows the math. I'm just going to let him tell me out loud. That's changing the mechanism for how that student expresses his or her knowledge. And so we'll have several different ones that we can mention here. I mean, Flipgrid is one that a lot of teachers are starting to really get that Flipgrid fire, and they're using it. I'm using it at the college level because some of my students do so much better expressing their knowledge orally. And that goes back to what Nathan says. We can kind of get down in the mud at the collegiate level with having to write. Everybody has to write long essays, writing lab, vocabulary, writing lab, mechanics. But really, does the student know the information? Can he or she synthesize it or apply it? And you can use Flipgrid for that. And a 5-minute Flipgrid tells you a lot with the right prompts, with the correct prompts that you put together for the student, what he or she knows, right? And I can even create a grid where I scaffold for my English language learners and put particular scaffolded vocabulary or questions, so that, I might push out 2 or 3 different versions to a group of students. So that's one. One idea is Flipgrid.
Yeah. I've had my students and not all this has to be like super techie either, although technology can definitely make it easier. I've had students create sketch notes on tablets before. or just on paper. I've had them also like come up with, and there's a really, really cool example of this that my wife just did in her classroom, where she took Google Slides and had the students create a digital art gallery. Like, and basically the background of the slides was like an art gallery, and the students could click to go into the different galleries. So it was like, it was slides, but it was also more like walkthrough-y, in that kind of a sense. I think to something that I know, Matt, you've worked on, and I've actually created these as well, is digital textbooks. And so basically what you can do with those is, if you make them on Google Slides, you've ever, thought about like, actually publishing material on there, those are really easy to differentiate content on, especially for students, because you can take the whole Google slide, make a copy of it, and then just instantly scale down or scale up, examples and those kind of things. And that's a really quick, easy way to differentiate.
And you could do that across different reading levels or across different levels of an English class.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm having my students right now work on a project. So the course is Schools in a Diverse Society, and I'm having them work on a project where they can use ThingLink, or they can use Padlet to create a resource board for an organization.
Yeah.
So they have to synthesize. They're applying and they're synthesizing information. Yeah.
And again, like it can sound kind of what I said earlier about like dangerous, about like letting your kids, perhaps you do allow them, on your first like big project or something that you might be doing in your room, to like let go and allow them to, express themselves in a variety of ways. But when you are differentiating product, like, you're going to have to at some point, like, let your kids express sometimes what they know in, through different products. It is one of the easiest ways to just like, and for me, it's been especially rewarding just to like say, I mean, I don't say like, let my kids go and see, like, show me what you got. It's much more structured, much more scaffolded than that. But like, if you will be amazingly surprised by what your students can do if you just say, okay,
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Show me, show me, indeed, show me what you got. Like,
take charge of your learning.
Yes.
This is about you. What's meaningful to you? What excites you about this topic?
Yeah, I mean,
it's just amazing how excited the students can get.
Like, as a, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Nate has had his things a little bit more structured. I've had an example where I tried to turn that over a little bit too much. There's one particular time I remember where we were studying something. I can't remember what it was. And I said, okay, now I want you to come up with a way to demonstrate what it is that you know how to do. And you can do it however you want. And I thought what I was doing was, I was like, here you go. Here's all of the freedom that you need. Go do something amazing. And the kids are all like, so you want me to make a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Do you want me to? Should I do it on a document? Like, what do you want me to do? And it's like, and of course, in that moment, I hadn't really experienced that before, and I was like, oh, this is so sad. I'm giving these kids all these freedom, but it turns out what I was doing, I wasn't giving them freedom. I was overwhelming them. And so with that release of control and that release of responsibility and some of that freedom, you've also got to have some constraints so that they don't feel totally overwhelmed. An example of that I've heard of is like, if a small child is playing in a yard and that yard is right next to a busy street, if they don't have a fence, I mean, they could potentially go everywhere and there's danger outside of it and everything. But when you put that fence up there, now all of a sudden that child can go all the way out to that fence and still be safe. And so it's like, if we put some of those constraints in place, that's really good. I wanted to throw a couple of examples along with that as far as ways to differentiate the product. Angie, you were talking about the, got to go back in my notes here, that we're not changing the outcome of what we want students to do. We're just changing the mechanism or the vehicle. And when you said that, that made me think of, instead, if we're going to do one of those essays, because some of us do essays,
Some students I loved to write when I was in high school.
Yeah, exactly.
You, Matt.
Yeah. I'm not hating on Nate for that. I think that's great what he was saying earlier. But I'm just saying, if you do that, sometimes The barrier ends up being the keyboard. You know, it's in here and students get frustrated because they have a hard time getting it through the keyboard onto the screen. And so the reason I bring that up is within Google Docs, you have voice typing, which is under the tools menu. And so you activate voice typing and you start talking, and now the ideas start flowing onto the screen and they don't have the keyboard as the barrier. And I know if students are working on, you know, smartphones or tablets or something, they've got dictation features built into them. In fact, almost all devices seem to have dictation features built in. So that's one way to change the way that we create the product, is not necessarily through the keyboard, but even through something like that. And then to take it a step further than that, I wanted to mention Seesaw too. Now,
great idea.
Yeah, see, Seesaw it's one of those tools. It's kind of like a learning community where students can create things and put it into a stream where everybody can see it. But it's also got this really great creative canvas that lets students create. And so they can create by drawing with their finger or on their touchpad, or by taking pictures, or by pulling pictures in. They can even record their screen with their microphone and talk things out. A lot of people think of Seesaw as that's just for little kids. That's just for like the K-5 crowd. Seesaw has made some upgrades recently that makes it a lot more powerful to use on something like a Chromebook or a laptop. So they're really, really branching out to more of the K-12 realm. And I love this because, you know, I got to see an example. I was meeting with some of the Seesaw folks at one point, and they showed me a student example that blew my mind. They had on the screen, I think it was, the student was trying to explain a math problem and the steps that she took. And you looked at the end product and it didn't make a bit of sense. And so if you're looking at that and you're grading it just based on that, it doesn't make a bit of sense. But what she had done was she had recorded her screen, which is super easy to do on Seesaw. You just pull up the canvas and you hit record, and you can start talking and drawing on the screen and moving things around. And so she started doing that. And when you heard her explain it in her own words, you got to see that she really did know what in the world she was doing. And whenever you do that, it's almost like you get to peer into the brain of your student, and you get to see their thought process and where that goes. And so by giving them an opportunity to do a product like that, that gives us much richer understanding of what they know than just turning something in. And so that's definitely one that I really like. And I think that to wrap, I'm sorry, I've got a lot of things to
application.
Yeah. And I think whenever your students start to see more and more of what the options are that are out there, you know, we talked about Google Drawings and voice typing and Seesaw and Flipgrid and ThingLink. And, you know, it's easy to get overwhelmed with all of these options, but if you slowly release some of these options to your students, the more that they understand what's out there, the more empowered they are to pick the one that's the best fit. In which case you as the student or you as the teacher don't necessarily have to make that decision for them. You can give them more power to do that themselves because they know, you know, they know what's out there. So just
let me give, if I could, a couple of tips on that as I think about beginning teachers, because that's what I spend my life doing, working with beginning teachers. The first one is some of those applications that I have them use for expressing their knowledge, I use while I'm teaching. So I might pull up a ThingLink, because ThingLink is a treasure trove of different ones that have been created by other teachers and students. So you do have to look through them carefully. But I pull up a ThingLink as an example for them to explore content. So they see what an eventual ThingLink product looks like while they're in my class naturally. Or they see what a Flipgrid looks like because I have them introduce themselves at the beginning of the course on Flipgrid. So the first time I suggest that as, hey, why don't you put a project on Flipgrid? It's not the first time in their learning life with me that they've seen that application. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The next thing I wanted to say is, and Nate, you and Nate can chime in because you have great experiences with this. I create like a project description, and this is part of our book, Teaching with Transparency. What's in Ridgway's head that she's thinking about when she thinks about this project. And I do that because there are course objectives that have to be met and assessments that have to be met. And we all have common assessments in our department or in our reading literacy groups that have to be done, right? So I put that in a project description that's pretty short for the students so they know like what's in her head that she's thinking about. And I have that in print. I hyperlink it, but I have it in print so they can go back and really tease that out and think through it. And then the third thing I do is write a rubric. And I wouldn't suggest necessarily you do this right at the beginning of your teaching career, but as I've grown as a teacher, then I have the students look at the rubric and we come to a mutual decision. Do you feel like this really does assess or portrays what you should know about our unit of study?
Right.
And so we have that conversation where they're buying into the way in which they're assessed. I didn't do that when I first taught because I didn't feel comfortable letting that much control of my class and my teaching, right? And the grading and all the things that come with it. But today I'm comfortable with, okay, one class has this rubric and this other class is tweaked a little bit the other way. Mm-hmm. So I would say a project description and a rubric will really help you to feel like you have that structure that Matt's mentioning that some students need, while at the same time letting them go free rein on being creative.
Yeah, and so you'll hear us like, and you may have picked up that when we talk about product, we're not just talking about the physical product that students are actually making. We're also talking about the intellectual product that students are making, which is the skills and the thinking and all those things that go into it. A great idea if you want to start to get your students to understand and to really like model the thinking that you're trying to achieve, even on something as basic as a worksheet, is to like take Flipgrid, record a video of you explaining like, okay, guys, this is why we're doing this worksheet. I'm really trying to get you to understand here, like, these particular objectives that we're trying to hit in class. And you download a QR code for that video, and then you just copy paste it into the top right hand corner of that worksheet. Mm-hmm. And then students can take Flipgrid AR, which is a new augmented reality app that Flipgrid has, and they can instantly see you explain, here's why we're doing this worksheet, here's what I'm looking for you to accomplish. Those things.
That's so good.
And another level of differentiation, because not only have you become transparent in your thinking as a historian in your case, right? But also there's a support for a language learner who just needs to hear it a couple of times, or for a student who struggles with processing from auditory to actually action, right?
And it literally takes 5 minutes.
Or there's something that they can share with their tutor, their family, anyone who's helping them, big brother or sister who's helping them with their academic work. Here's how Mr. Ridgway wanted this to go, right?
Yeah,
so that's
so good.
A way to differentiate too.
Yeah. Let me go back to that, what you were just saying about Flipgrid AR, which is so good because just in case someone's watching this and you heard that and you're like, that sounds cool, but how do you do that again? It's basically all you're doing is you're recording a video of an explanation of a problem. Mm-hmm. And once you're done with that video, you can have a share link created for that video. And instead of grabbing the link, you can just grab a QR code. You can do either one. QR code will get them to that video. A link will get them to that video.
You could do both, right?
Yeah. And what Nate was suggesting is if you've got a paper or an assignment or something, if you can put that little QR code or put that little link next to that question, then if students struggle with it, they can scan the QR code or they can click on the link and they can see your video of you explaining it. Mm-hmm. So the ones that aren't so the ones that aren't struggling with it probably are just going to jump right onto that question and just do it and go. But the ones who are struggling with it have that recording of you that they can go back to, and they can even replay it over and over again if they want to.
Absolutely.
And because Flipgrid has stuff like immersive reader and stuff like that, if you have English language learners, they can download it with visual dictionaries, and it's just silly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Lots of support.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We're starting to get a little close to the end of our time here, and I know that we've talked about content and we've talked about product, and we haven't really touched on process yet, which is fine. In fact, there's a lot of stuff that we could pull out of this. That we could pull out of this book that we could share on all of this, because I know there's also the reflection side of things, kind of like the metacognition side of things. P.S. If you're watching this and you keep hearing some of these words and you're like, ugh, like differentiation earlier made you go, ugh, if metacognition makes you go, oh, like that, we've got some stuff that you can actually do that doesn't make you do that, that actually like helps your students think through it. So don't let those, those words scare you off. But let's kind of throw out one more parting idea as we wrap up. And it can be from the process, it could be from the reflection side of things, just like, what's your one last good idea that you want to leave everybody with?
I'm going to talk about just a second about metacognition. So that's encouraging your students to think about thinking. And what I have done, even, when I was teaching middle school and high school, was had a share out with the students. Let's talk about how we're learning this today. Let's talk with our shoulder partner about how you learned the vocabulary for today. What made it easier for you? What strategies did you use? What things did you try to practice and use this vocabulary? But what I'm like about back channel chat is that I can put a prompt on the screen, and the students can just type away, and you can have them use either, it's not a meme, but what is it?
You can use memes for metacognition.
They can have them put a meme. You can have them put
an animated GIF, I bet is what you're thinking.
GIF. You can have them put their name. But with back channel chat, then, it's closed.
Is it closed?
No, that was today's meet closed.
Yeah. Can we stop for just a second and tell everybody that back channel chat is a website that is available for free. All of your you can create a room, kind of like a room within back channel chat, and all of your students can jump into it, and it's just a space where everybody can type a message that everybody's able to see. It's almost like kind of like a forum or a chat room that you as the teacher set up and control.
So you put a question up and you say, how did you learn this concept? Or how did you study for this test? Or how did you prepare for this project? Or what did you do to put the paper together? And students can share their ideas to help each other. Because I find that, of course, I'm preferential auditory, and language teachers often are, but my students might be visual or tactile, and they'll have strategies to help each other that are better than my own. And it keeps that record. We just talked about Flipgrid not Flipgrid. What were we talking about? Yeah, Flipgrid keeps the record that they can go back to. Well, back channel chat keeps a record that you can go back to and say, okay, really, what made it easy for my students during this unit of study? Or what was challenging? You could ask either question.
And metacognition doesn't need to and just like differentiation, it has a lot of syllables. It sounds scary. But it doesn't need to be overly complicated. Like, this is a Google form, and I'll just briefly read it off, like that I give my students halfway through one of their projects. So it says, select one of the following options. I haven't started on my project. I made some progress on my project, but not a lot. For example, you know what you're doing, but I haven't started yet. I've made good progress on my project. I know what I'm doing, and I've gotten some of it done. And then number 4 is I've finished my project. And then I have describe it, like, what are you making? What do you think's going well with it? What do you think you need more work on? What help do you need from Mr. Ridgway? And then that's it. So it's not like a complicated Google form, but it's having students take the time. And this is something I didn't really appreciate until I really got into like my second and third year of teaching, is that students need time to process the knowledge that they have learned. And metacognition is such a big part of that.
Can I throw one more simple one out that I used here? And I just had them, it just said, compose an email to someone who cheers you on in your life. Anyone. Compose an email. Send me a blind carbon copy, and they don't know what carbon copy is, which is funny.
A BCC.
But send me a copy, or just cut and paste that into an email so that I know it was sent. And it was, describe what you've learned in this course, describe how you will need support from this important person in your life. And there was a third one that I can't remember. And it was so funny because they sent these emails, and then I started getting emails from the parents. Oh my goodness, I didn't know what was going on in the college class. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for having my students share. But it was to try to have them share with the people invested in their life what's going on with them in school.
Yeah.
And then it was a reflection piece too.
I love that. I love that. That's great. I feel like whenever we give students the space to do what we've just been talking about here, to do a little bit of that thinking about how we think, thinking about how we learn, thinking about how we're doing on our work. When we give them a chance to do that, I think it sharpens their skills. It makes me, I use this analogy all the time. Forgive me if you're watching this and you've heard me use this analogy before in another video. I can't even remember if I have. I like to think about it like sharpening a saw, which with, apologies to Stephen Covey, and I think to Lincoln, who I think the quote is attributed to. I think he's the one that we attribute the quote that says that if I have, again, I'll butcher this quote, sorry. If I have, 5 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 3 sharpening the saw or sharpening the axe. And I feel like whenever we don't stop and think about how we're thinking, how we learn, how we're doing, so that we can improve on those things, I feel like we're trying to cut a tree down with a blunt saw, with a blunt axe, just with a dull saw, because we're doing all of this work, all of this action, all of this activity, and we're not getting near as much out of it as we could. But if we'll stop for a second and do that metaphorical sharpening of the saw, where we stop and we think about, how can I do this better? How do other people do this? What are some strategies I could use? Then all of a sudden we come back to it with a sharper saw, and we'll get more accomplished with that than we will if we just plowed through. And so that's why I think what we've just been talking about here is so important.
And the reality is, in today's information age, we can never teach our students all they need to know about any content. But what we can do is teach them to be better thinkers and great thinkers and better learners, because they're going to be learning the rest of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been such good stuff. Really, really appreciate you guys doing this. Let me throw this out to you real quick as we wrap up. If somebody's been watching this and they're like, oh, this is so good, these are such great examples, I wish I had some more examples. Well, first of all, just gonna hold that there for a second. There's that. But even if you don't go get the book, there's a ton of free stuff that's out there that people can go check out. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a website called Teaching from the Ridge.
Yeah.
Get the play on the name Ridgway, Teaching from the Ridge.
Yeah, teachingfromtheridge.com. And when you go there, either a pop-up will pop up, which is kind of redundant, but whatever. And it says 15 free appetizers from Don't Ditch That Tech. And that will give you a customized, basically, playlist of apps and ideas for those apps and how you can use them based on actually a survey that everybody takes when they read the book. So that is there for you. And you also get 3 free ebooks sent to you as well when you sign up for that pop-up thing. So that's there.
And we might also plug our podcast, which is specifically created for beginning teachers, called Make It Till Friday. And so we walk beginning teachers through a variety of topics that when we encounter when we're first in our practice. And Matt's been an amazing guest along with 12 or 13 others.
And we talk about everything on there, from interviewing to trauma responsive teaching to, and it's available on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and then also Stitcher, I believe.
Excellent.
All free to support beginning teachers.
Yes. So if you've loved all of this stuff so far and you're looking for more free stuff, then check out the website, check out the podcast. It's all right there. This has been great stuff. Angie and Nate, thank you again so much for joining us for this session.
Yes.
And and thank you for watching this video, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next video from the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit.